Between a volatile economy, constant digital demands, and deepening global uncertainty, modern life can feel like a relentless storm. We spend a massive amount of energy trying to micromanage our careers, our reputations, and our futures, only to find ourselves exhausted and anxious when things inevitably veer off script. Around 300 BC, a wealthy Phoenician merchant named Zeno of Citium experienced the ultimate loss of control. Caught in a disaster at sea, Zeno survived a shipwreck but lost his entire cargo. He washed ashore in Athens with absolutely nothing. Stripped of his wealth and status in a single afternoon, he was forced to confront a brutal question. How do you keep living when the universe arbitrarily takes everything away? Searching for an answer, Zeno began studying with local philosophers and eventually formulated a system of his own. He realized that human suffering rarely comes from the actual disasters we face. Instead, we suffer because we confuse what is entirely within our control with what is completely outside of it. The world is inherently chaotic. The pain comes from expecting it to be otherwise and demanding a level of control over the chaos that we simply do not possess. To solve this, Epictetus formalized the dichotomy of control. Achieving peace requires dividing the world into two strict categories. First, things not up to us, like the weather, economy, and others' opinions. Second, things up to us, our own conscious thoughts, chosen responses, and ethical actions. Every ounce of emotional energy you invest in that first category, worrying about a promotion or obsessing over someone's opinion, is energy handed over to fortune. You make yourself a hostage to a system that does not care about your plans. True mental freedom begins the moment you abandon your desire to dictate the external world and ruthlessly focus your attention on mastering your own internal reactions. Now look closely at this text, detailing a common trap. People often assume that mastering your internal reactions means suppressing all emotion entirely. The ancients called their goal apatheia, which meant freedom from pathos, toxic, explosive, and irrational passions like obsessive lust, blinding rage, or paralyzing terror. They recognize that feeling the initial shock of a loud noise or the immediate grief of a loss is a natural human reflex. Stoics stop these natural reflexes from escalating by using logic as a protective fence. When a stressful thought enters the mind, you examine it objectively, testing the impression before agreeing to believe it. There is a crucial gap in time between an external trigger, like a rude comment, and your emotional reaction. By pausing to apply reason in that gap, you interrupt the reflex. You choose a measured response rather than an explosive one. Building an inner citadel does not mean you stop feeling things. It means creating a mental fortress where logic prevents external chaos from dictating your internal peace. To understand how to actually live this out, the early Stoics relied on the metaphor of an archer. An expert archer controls their footing, their breathing, and the tension of the bowstring. They do everything perfectly. But the moment the arrow leaves the bow, a sudden gust of wind can blow it completely off course. The archer's goal isn't to hit the target, because the target is external. Their goal is simply to shoot to the absolute best of their ability. By defining success purely by their own effort, the result no longer matters. This leads to what the Greeks called eudaimonia, or genuine human flourishing, a state achieved by adhering to 4 indivisible virtues. This breakdown shows those virtues: wisdom, the ability to view situations rationally; courage, the fortitude to endure hardship; justice, acting fairly for the common good; and temperance, the discipline to resist excess. Wealth, health, and reputation are nice to have, but the Stoics categorize them as preferred indifference. They are entirely irrelevant to your moral character. Because your flourishing relies on virtue instead of luck, your happiness is entirely portable. You can thrive just as completely in a tiny prison cell as you can in an emperor's palace. The Stoics viewed philosophy as ascesis, a rigorous daily psychological workout performed in the public spaces of the Athenian agora. Reading this overview of their daily exercises, we find the practice of premeditatio malorum. Instead of relying on fragile optimism, you deliberately visualize worst-case scenarios. By repeatedly imagining the loss of your job or the end of a relationship, you strip those fears of their shock value. The statesman Seneca took this a step further with voluntary discomfort. As one of the richest men in Rome, he would routinely spend a few days eating cheap food and sleeping on the floor. Once he realized he could survive with very little, the fear of losing his vast wealth evaporated. They also embraced amor fati, the active love of whatever fate brings, treating every obstacle as fuel for growth. And they practiced memento mori, a daily reflection on their own mortality, forcing absolute clarity on how to spend the present moment. Deliberately exposing yourself to simulated hardship is like taking a psychological vaccine. You build an immunity to distress, making you highly resilient against real-world chaos. 2,000 years later, this exact framework remains highly operational. In fact, it serves as the direct foundation for the most widely used evidence-based psychological treatment in the world today, cognitive behavioral therapy. In the mid-20th century, pioneers like Aaron T. Beck built CBT directly on Epictetus's premise. Identifying and challenging your irrational beliefs is the fastest way to change your emotional response. Today, elite athletes, military commanders, and executives use these precise mental exercises to separate signal from noise, maintaining intense focus under extreme pressure. Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius held absolute global power, yet he spent his nights writing private journal entries, reminding himself to be patient, forgiving, and indifferent to fortune. He used stoicism not to conquer the world, but to govern his own mind. Stoicism offers a final, empowering thesis. The only lasting freedom is the internal resilience required to remain unbroken by external circumstances.